Welcome to part 2 of the interview with Henry Bosco. In this segment of the interview, Hank talks about growing up in the 1930s and his encounter with the notorious gangster Diamond Jack.
As a youngster, 5 or 6 years old, both my parents worked at the little Star Hotel, and they worked long hours, but I had to stick pretty close to the hotel. I pretty much hung out in the lobby of the Star Hotel, where I met many of the guests and visited with them. I guess from that very beginning, I've been blessed with being around people all my life. And that's something I hope to continue doing as long as I'm able. I just can't imagine not being around people every day.
What skills do you think you brought from that experience? You said being around people.
Just being able to carry on a conversation. I was a little bit bashful, but they'd joke with me and kid me along. A lot of them were railroaders, engineers, conductors, so forth, that would be here overnight. And they got to be kind of like one of the family, you know. And then came the movie theaters. They called them talkies, and that was when they had sound. Before that, they were subtitled movies.
Did you get to go to the movies quite a bit?
Oh, not every day or every week, but every couple of weeks.
So it was kind of a treat.
Yeah, to get my mom or my dad, one or the other, would take me, and we'd buy a bag of popcorn and watch the movie. I was always impressed by the cowboys and the Indians.
So there was a lot of westerns at that time in them.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Let me take you back to the lobby of the Star Hotel. You said that as a little kid you had to hang out there. How did you pass your time?
Oh, with Crayolas and reading library books.
Were there other kids that you played with?
Yeah. There were kids from the neighborhood. The neighborhood was probably a 2 or 3 block radius from the Star Hotel. And all the kids that lived in that area would meet in the alley and play kick the can or run sheep run. And there was always a crowd of kids as we got older.
Now, these railroad guys, you said, that would come through, so the trains would stop in Glenwood, and so the railroad workers would stay overnight?
Yes. A lot of them would come in on one train and stay overnight and head back east the next day.
For a lot of people, the 30s were a pretty difficult time.
It was.
What do you remember? What were some of the signs for you as a kid?
Well, you know, later, and at around age 10 or 12, I had a close friend, Abe Valesky. He was like a brother to me, and we kind of chummed around together. And
so Abe was this friend that you had. Well, he was a lifelong friend, right?
Pretty much. He lived in the neighborhood. He lived over on Blake Avenue. His dad worked for the railroad. He worked on the section. His mother was ill with asthma, and they had 5 children, and the mother passed away. And the father, Greg Valesky, here he was with 5 kids to raise and no wife, and a meager salary, I'm sure, with the railroad. So different people took in each of the 5 kids. And my parents took in Abe, and Abe came and lived with us. Grace, his sister, Gracie, Valesky was taken in by Beth and Bill Farnham. Carol Valesky was the oldest. Dr. Hopkins took him under his wing, and he used to help Doc Hopkins at his hospital. Arthur was taken in by a Trentaz family up around Woody Creek and worked on their ranch. Let's see, there's one missing. Oh, Larry. Larry was taken in by a family in Newcastle called Pendergrast. And so the kids were all farmed out, but they all were farmed out to good homes. And,
Well, that must have been difficult for the father, but particularly difficult for the kids, huh?
Yeah.
How did Abe come through that? Did he
he came through it all right. Yeah.
Folks were having a struggle. Some of them must have come to your father for... Talk about your father and his role in the community at that time.
Yeah. Well, my parents made a living out of that Star Hotel, and they were far from considered being wealthy. But then my dad got into the grape business, which I've spoken to before, and he made a lot of friends up and down the valley. Mostly farmers and ranchers, but it's fairly well-to-do people. And but during the Depression, times were tough, and Abe and I'd sell papers. Oh, we'd also go down. Back in those days, at the end of each street was a sewer that just dumped into the river. And these fish called suckers would hang around there, and they were thick, and they'd grow big. And they were so thick you could catch them with your hands. And Abe and I'd go down there and catch these suckers.
Stand in the sewer water and catch suckers. Yeah. I bet your mom didn't know you were doing that, did she?
No.
No, I wouldn't imagine. Now, you have a story of sort of a gangster type was in town at one point.
Yeah.
When you were a kid. Tell me that story.
Diamond Jack. He was an adversary of the Capone gang in Chicago, but a competitor, so to speak. And he would spend time at the Denver Hotel and at Sweetwater Lake every summer. And he was a pretty flashy dresser. He wore a huge cowboy hat. It would span as wide as his shoulders.
He must have looked kind of odd at the time.
And he wore 2 pistols, one on each hip with pearl handles. He had a Model A Ford with a rumble seat, if you know what a rumble seat is. And Abe and I and everything on that car was chrome-plated. And he'd park that car in front of the Denver Hotel. Abe and I would get out there and admire that car. And on occasion, he'd come by and say, "You want to go for a ride?" And we'd say, "Sure." And he'd open that rumble seat, and we'd jump in the back.
Was he staying at the hotel?
At the Denver.
At the Denver.
Yeah.
So he gave you and Abe a ride?
Oh yeah, quite often.
Oh, so a number of rides.
Yeah. And he'd always give us a package of blackjack gum, which was a licorice-flavored gum. I guess it's long gone, but...
So he would just drive around town?
Drive around town, yeah. And we thought that was really neat, driving around town with this guy in that fancy car and his big hat. And we were really living until my mother saw us one time. He went by the hotel, and Mom happened to look out. Oh, we caught hell from her.
Hank and Abe riding around with the gangster.
Yeah, yeah.
So was he dangerous? Did he seem dangerous? And of course, maybe not to you. You wouldn't be riding with him, but
he seemed friendly.
what was your mom's concern?
Well, his reputation of being a gangster and a killer. And,
Was he always wearing his guns?
yeah.
So whenever
He used to go play poker at the pool hall, which was about where the Springs restaurant is now. And he got into an argument with a guy named Whitey Hutton from Rifle, who was a prize fighter, a boxer. And Whitey was staying at the hotel, too. And they got into a verbal argument, and Whitey got up and just left the card game, went to his room at the hotel, and Diamond Jack followed him. And right just off the lobby, a couple doors down the hall, Diamond Jack pulls out his guns and starts shooting through the door, and he hit Whitey in the legs a couple times.
So he shot through a closed door trying to shoot at Whitey?
Yeah. Whitey didn't die immediately, but he later on died from complications from the gunshot wounds.
What was the outcome of that?
He was tried and banned from ever returning to the state of Colorado.
Well, that sounds like he got off pretty easy.
Yeah, he did.
He murdered somebody.
Well, they couldn't say he murdered. He died of complications from the shooting, but who could say that it was the gunshot that caused him to die? Or
well, today they would be saying that's a different set of rules back then. I would think.
Yeah.
Were you aware that this was a hard time?
Well, we didn't ever go hungry or anything like that. We weren't that bad off, but we were far from being considered wealthy. We were pretty frugal. In the Star Hotel, Abe and I had chores we used to have to do after school and on weekends. One of which, the little bars of soap you put in a hotel guest room, and people would leave them behind. We'd take them down the furnace room and put them in cardboard boxes and set them on top of the boiler to dry them out. And then we had a grinder. It was kind of like a clothes wringer with a crank on it. And we'd dump these little bars of soap in there and grind the soap to do the laundry with for the hotel.
You made detergent, snowflake or soap flakes.
Yeah.
In the last interview, you talked about growing up. You kind of felt like you had an inferiority complex.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about. Because I think people have forgotten, and I don't know. Maybe it's a memory that you don't really want to share. But
it's
Italians had a fairly rough time during the 20s and 30s as far as fitting in.
By and large, they were hard rock miners or coal miners. In fact, my dad's uncle, who helped my dad come here from Italy, was a hard rock miner. And these miners would just go in these underground tunnels and work all day. And it was a tough, back-breaking job, dirty job, long hours, dusty. And I always felt like Italians, by and large, were just the common labor, working class. Their clothes were dirty, and
well, they were seen as poor because they oftentimes were, or at least blue collar.
Yeah, oh yeah, very much so. And so I just figured, well, that was the fate of being an Italian.
That was Hank Bosco recalling life in the 1930s in the Star Hotel. Just a footnote on Diamond Jack. On December 18th, 1931, he was gunned down in his hideout at Albany, New York.